My talk is so excitingly titled, talking about the idea of data sets as opposed to dashboards. This will hopefully sound really obvious, really simple, but it does, like most things, have nuanced side effects to life. So, first major question you should be asking yourself is, why should you listen to me? Which is generally a good start to the conversation. Currently running Metabase, which is an open source BI project, which we'll talk about later. In a flashback to my previous life, hearing Paul talk about Git and GitHub metrics, I'd actually started a company around analyzing GitHub commits, ended up selling that and joining General Catalyst, where I was data science in residence. And in a past life, I was an ML researcher, and after that, the head of data science at IB. So I've managed to see kind of the interaction of data science, analytics, reporting, general like standard engineering, as well as having bounced around venture community for a little while. So what's all this data sets nonsense? It sounds kind of obvious. You have a data set, you're a data scientist, you're an analyst. You're clearly doing something with that data. And the fundamental kind of motivation for this, or the reason that you can talk about it, is there's a very predictable sequence of events and desires that happens after you hand off a dashboard or a deck or you give a presentation. And so it starts off with, can you give me a cohort analysis of people that signed up in Malaysia? Awesome, straightforward, go to Google Analytics, hit whatever you're gonna hit, filters, you go. You hand this over to someone who's studying a product launch somewhere, and there's going to be 30 or 40 easily predictable, boring requests that come afterwards. So awesome, how do we break down by gender? How do we break down by incoming acquisition channel? How did blah, blah, blah. Oh, so-and-so just noticed that there's this connection between fraud rates and a coupon code they shipped 2 weeks ago. Now, if you're in the middle of that, it's probably going to stop you from doing anything interesting in your day. So you hand over a dashboard, people look at it, they get really excited, they keep asking you stuff. And at some point, you know, all the stuff you're talking about around ML flows and pipelines and exciting things all get hijacked by just, oh, can you answer this next question for me? So having seen that play out in my career, in my friends' careers, and just every company I've advised for the last 6 or 7 years, maybe get ahead of that. Like, it keeps happening, so maybe change how we do things a little bit. And going into it a little more concretely, you know that when you hand something over, an intelligent person's going to look at it, and that they're going to have some opinions, and they have some simple questions, and that there are things you can predict. When you just sort of throw over the wall, hey, here's this chart, here's this dashboard, here's a deck, basically the only good questions that got asked of you and that you asked in a process are answered. People who are around that presumably are around it because they care, because something about that product launch in Malaysia matters to somebody, and they're probably going to have some sort of insights, some sort of further questions, and it's just some ability to meaningfully interact with it. And the real thing that's wrong with all this is you're in the middle of all of it. So anything interesting you're planning on doing with your day, week, month gets hijacked anytime you actually deliver something of value. So if you throw a dashboard over the wall and no one cares, you can go about your day. The second you do something valuable or useful, everyone's going to come back and be like, oh, this, and this. So how to fix this? Well, the good news is you can generally just keep doing what you're doing. So I'm a huge fan of constructive laziness. I'd say that in some ways the entire DNA of Metabase is be lazier. And the key thing though is as you are planning to hand things off, just stop and pause as you're making that final set of presentation material. And think about making that data that you're using for that final step intelligible all on its own. So hand off denormalized data, hand off things that can be understood by normal human beings, hand off things that the average intelligent person in your company would open up in Excel and be like, oh, I know what these columns mean. I can slice and dice this. I've used pivot tables. Let's pretend. And kind of going into how your end users will use this. The obvious dumb thing is Google Sheets or Excel, or I'm here and I'm paying my own little product. And I'd say just use Metabase. Kind of a little detour into what Metabase is. We're an open source just analytics platform. Our whole thing is we'll do some magic to scan a data warehouse, data model, build an ontology and model out of it, and let normal human beings just click around and figure this shit out. So for Docker image installs anywhere in a couple minutes, connects to a database, and we're pretty much just super slick, super easy, dirt simple way for normal humans to interact with data. If I'm lucky, this will work. And this will kind of show you what the end user experience is like. One thing to throw out is all of this is pretty much zero config. So out of the box, you essentially get interactive querying. You get the ability to generate like explorations that are essentially dashboards, and all this is usable by pretty much anyone that can use a mouse. So I think it's pretty cool. I've spent a couple years of my life on this. A couple, 10,000 companies use it, so try it out. So now going back to the real reason I'm here, which is trying to spread the gospel of don't hand off dashboards. There is a question for why you personally should bother with this. So presumably you're doing a job because you wanted the job and because you care about the company you're working at. Ideally, you care about the project you're on. When you've done something, you want other people to actually use it as opposed to throwing it in the ether. And so the more accessible the thing that you hand off is, the more generic it is, the more someone who who isn't you can interact with it and figure out what's happening and generally get value that you don't expect from. And honestly, the more of a beneficial effect you have in your company. The other thing that starts to happen as you adopt this mindset is you start having better data sets sitting around for other uses. So if you have a clean data set around user behavior, you can generally pipe that into a machine learning algorithm. You can generally mix and match things. You can generally really quickly build and deploy simple apps for specific users. So for example, marketing and sales don't really talk the same language all the time. And having a data set that marketing understands and a data set that sales understands makes it really easy to spin up little mini apps for sales or for marketing or whatever. So this is kind of where I get into a little bit of technical stuff, I think. So all this should hopefully obviously be very dependent on your underlying data set and your audience. So at some point, a normal human being will read those column names, will be playing around with the fields, values in the columns. And so start off with use real words. Abbreviations are cool and make columns shorter, but just use real words. Not everyone knows how TXN expands out. If you're going to use jargon, use their jargon. So if you're talking to marketing people, don't use engineering jargon. They have their own set of vocabulary. It's useful to learn that language and speak to them in their language. Use words as they're used by your target user. So this sounds really, really stupid and obvious, but it's actually kind of tricky. So pro tip, bookings and revenue are not the same. And there are people who will freak out if you misuse them because the numbers look weird and they lose their shit, pardon my French. Some more obvious things, replace enums with actual text they signify, because no one's gonna remember what 0 is or 2 is 6 months down the road. One of my favorite hobby horses is get rid of test data. Most places that run things at scale have all kinds of crap sitting in the database, and things like soft deletes, things that you don't actually need, just get it out. Another thing is let tables get big. A wide table where everything in the column headings is straight English or whatever language your company uses is better than a bunch of small tables that people don't understand how to combine. Normal human beings don't understand joins at all, ever. So this is a really contrived example. Hopefully it'll give you a sense of the flavor of how this proceeds. So cohort analysis, we've got a user table, we've got an events table. There's very helpfully a user ID in the events table. And so one of the first questions is, what do you enrich and why? So obviously people think about users and don't think about events. So you'll probably want to enrich the users table, which is weird and not what you probably normally do if you're handing off a data set. If you're doing this in ETL land, you'd probably enrich the events table and you'd probably try to have that be consumable on its own. Most people you talk to, if they're thinking about user demographics and behavior, they'll be centered on this idea of users have done things. And so, as annoying as it is, and as tedious as it might be to keep adding columns, just saying, this is the first event, last event of certain kinds, maybe this is the first login, last login, this is the first buy action, last buy action. And then Another thing that is a common trick in cohort analysis is just creating a table where given users are active on certain days. Now, all that's very contrived. If you're interested in that, talk to me later. But assuming that you believe in that, next steps are you generate this activity table. And this is a bunch of SQL that I wrote, and I suck at writing SQL these days, so I'm taking it too seriously. But this is kind of one of our sample data sets. You create this use activity by day. You then join with an activity table to create a denormalized sense of where users are from. And usually at this point, people freak out and they're like, but I've got a petabyte. And so you're probably not going to hand over a petabyte, presumably. Though it's kind of shocking how large data sets how large a data set people can iteratively query and play with if you set things up right. So at some point, like, you just throw things in Druid and let it happen. And adding another table to Druid is generally pretty cheap and easy. And there's something magic that happens when people can slice and dice things in a second. People start finding all kinds of weird stuff. One of our great user stories is there was a floor worker at a flower shipping factory who discovered a set of fraudulent transactions because they kept shipping roses to Luxembourg. And they were like, somehow this seems really weird. And someone that was like a line manager in the factory was like, this coupon code seems fishy. And they poked around, they used us, and they eventually found that, oh, there seems to be this fraudulent coupon code that got passed around. It's unclear they would have found that until way later, but there is just something magic that happens when everyone can just tap around and find things immediately. And then it's also 2018, things are kind of cheap now, like compared to how life was 10 or 15 years ago when I started my analyst career. Like, it's like an office budget, it's an office snack budget, like $5 for a terabyte query. Like, how many people have espresso machines in their office? So that's what, like $3 a pop? $2 a pop. So at this point, things get boring again. So you've got this data set, you try to like figure out what users want, what they'll probably want next. And so you should start anticipating what the next derived dimensions are. You should start doing all the basic stuff around geo. One interesting thing is, if you're handing this off to be sliced and diced by a normal human being, they're not going to be able to do lat long to kilometer calculations. So do it for them and like try to figure out interesting spots to hand off. This is one of those things where it's going to feel very special cased, but it's a lot less special cased than a dashboard you hand over. And they are going to come back and be like, cool, so can you get me the distance from our headquarters in Zurich, as opposed to wherever at that point. It's useful to also just kind of revisit what is typically an earlier stage, which is data exploration. So you probably did a lot of data exploration of the original data set. So this is a great time to do that again and see whether the data set you're handing off has any weird anomalies in it. Chances are there's artifacting. Chances are you made a few mistakes, and it's a really good time to just go through it like normally use your word, or like you would in an earlier stage of exploration, and just see it's all right. A lot of people I talk to claim to do this already, and the reality is they don't. Because data sets exist, they're on HDFS somewhere, they're supposedly clean, they're great, someone's really proud of them, and no one in the company knows they exist. So at some point, the process of handing over that data set and the, hey John, hey Jenny, this is the thing I want you to see really matters. This is where we shine because we're dirt simple, easy, free, install in 5 minutes, got it, etc. And the ability to send someone a link to be like, hey, here's this thing that I created, take a look at it. And most people have given choice between an interactive dashboard and a really interactive data set that just looks and feels like a dashboard. Take the latter every time. I think that should be my time. Questions, concerns, death threats?
Thank you. So I have a quick question. One thing that I guess like is a philosophy of your tool, from what I understand, is like any mention is like denormalizing the data as much as you can.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
There's a caveat there, yes.
Okay, for sure. I was just curious, so like where do you think logically those transformations should they live? Like at the database layer, should I be defining views for all of these things? should they live at the layer of the tool, whether that be like Metabase or something else?
Depends on how certain you are. So if you're dead certain that a given transformation is super valuable, do it way early. So for the most part, you're doing behavioral analytics, you will want to create some sort of intermediate table you can then calculate behavior off of. In this case, it's just the activity by day. So if someone MAU, DAU, or weekly active in that given day, that's used everywhere, so do it early. And it has really huge performance implications downstream to like 10, 20, 50 different reports. If you're like, hey, I think this thing might be interesting, you probably want to use just a join in the final layer. And if it sucks, throw it away. If it's great, move it up the stack. I'd say that if you think about it as how far upstream you go is essentially how rigidly you're creating something upstream. It depends on how right you are and how deep the performance consequences are downstream. And the larger the performance consequences are, and the more certain you are, the further up you push it. And one great example of what happens when you push all the way up is if you're doing sessionization to a client side. So before it even touches the final data warehouse, like sessionize things at the point of the session being started. I can rant against the evils of server or post hoc sessionization there, but that's
I have a quick follow-up to that. So also like let's imagine that, right? Like I've tried to denormalize everything, like everything that I've thought of, but inevitably like there's going to be some things I missed, or some things that might be worth doing. And I like that you mentioned like normal users don't understand joins. And like agree 100%, very frustrating. So like what are some strategies you think to get around that in those cases when you could denormalize it?
I mean, the honest answer is you're going to get it wrong, and that's fine. They're going to find stuff, you're going to fix it, you're going to go over and over again. And in some ways, that iterative loop is the job. So the idea that there's going to be this magic process that proofs out the exact spec, and this is the schema for the final table, is just not how things work. It's going to be messy, it's going to be annoying, you're going to have a bunch of people who are, this thing's a little wrong, that thing's a little wrong, and in many ways, just that is the gig. And so it's more about getting good at that cycle, automating the production of these things, getting a clean sense of process, and just emotional budget. That like you're going to do this, and there's going to be another 2 weeks of cleanup. It's not magic, basically.
So from what I see, I presume that one of the key selling points for this technology is ease of use.
Yes.
And beyond ease of use, I'm curious as to what additional differentiating factors this product has compared to some of the other technologies out there, like Superset, Apache Superset.
Yeah, I think
BI, Tableau, Looker, etc.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is that we're not really a tool for analysts to be analysts. We're a tool for people that are being strong-armed into building dashboards. So go back to doing whatever that's the one to realize. So we're not necessarily the most fine-grained, fiddly things where you can't make a pixel-perfect dashboard, though our design is actually better than most other people. We're primarily something that automates the creation of that first 6 slides in a 12-slide deck. So if you think about us as like a final BI tool, we're not really that. We're more a thing that lets your end users do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And so that sounds kind of hand-wavy, but it actually cascades through to like what features we have, how the product works, how we install it, who installs it. For the most part, in an ideal world, we're kind of a fire and forget thing where you install us, you curate the data sets, and then your end users figure out their emails, they create their own dashboards, and in many ways, it's as big a jump from Looker, Periscope, or Mode, wherever else, to us as it was from Cognos business objects to Tableau. Like, if you look at things that are pre-Tableau, there's all like fiddliness and like write out expression. And this idea like drag and dropping dimensions and metrics, kind of transform everything. I think we're kind of a similar jump where it is just usability and it is just like who can use it and how easy it is, but it does just create a different style of use inside companies where instead of it being a data priesthood that like anoints certain numbers and hands over dashboards, just anyone can fiddle and futz and tap around and do their jobs.